Quran and the Bible have many similarities. At least 15 prophets and their stories mentioned in the Bible are also present in the Quran. But here is the problem. Because the Quran was revealed at least 600 years after the Gospel and over 1000 years after the Torah, some people, including prominent pastors, evangelists, and even a few of my viewers on this channel, claim that the Quran has simply copied the Bible. At first glance, it may sound convincing to ordinary people. After all, why would the Quran mention the same stories and same character unless it was borrowing from the Bible? That's exactly what many Christians and Jews argue, that the Quran is not a divine book, but a plagiarized version of the Bible. This is an extraordinary claim, because if true, it means that the Prophet Muhammad was not a real prophet. Therefore, I am going to take the most logical approach to dig deeper into the truth to find out who is right. And I guarantee you that by the end of this video, you will have a compelling evidence to decide for yourself if the Quran is indeed copied. So let's get into this. Moses and Jesus are the central figure of Judaism and Christianity, and their teachings and the books they brought are what defines these religions. Interestingly and surprisingly for many, Moses and Jesus, or otherwise known as Musa and Isa, are also the key figures in the Quran and are highly respected among Muslims, and therefore believing in them is a necessary as per the Quran. Therefore, Muslims argue that these similarities exist because all these prophets, such as Adam, Noah, Abraham, Moses, Jesus, and Muhammad, to name a few, were messengers of the same one God. Just as Moses received the Torah and Jesus received the Gospel to guide their people, Prophet Muhammad received the Quran, the final revelation to guide all of humanity. So naturally, their message and the stories are similar because they have a common roots, not because one copied from the other. Jews and Christians, on the other hand, do not buy this logic. Their argument is simple. This similarity is due to the fact that the author of the Quran has copied the verses from the Bible, and therefore it is not original. So let's analyze this claim. If the Quran was indeed copied from the Bible, certain conditions must be met, just like any accusation of the plagiarism. Here is what would have to be true. First, the storyline must be almost identical, and not just the character of the story. Second, if the original story contains any historical errors or contradiction, the copy should include them too. After all, if someone is copying, they won't know which part are incorrect. Third, the copied version should not contain any additional accurate information not present in the original copy, especially not the details that were unknown at that time and only verified centuries later. So let's apply this model in our case as well, in the story of Moses and Pharaoh, which is one of the most easily found stories both in the Bible and in the Quran. According to both Bible and the Quran, the ruler of the Egypt during Moses' time was called Pharaoh. However, there is a major historical problem in the Bible. In the book of Genesis, the king of Egypt at the time of Abraham and Joseph are also called Pharaoh. And that's historically inaccurate, as confirmed by modern Egyptology and mainstream academic sources. According to Encyclopedia Britannica, the word Pharaoh came to be used metonymically for the Egyptian king under the New Kingdom starting in the 18th dynasty. In contrast, the Quran never makes this mistake. The Quran never calls an Egyptian ruler Pharaoh before Moses' time, either in the story of Joseph or in the story of Abraham. The term Pharaoh appeared 74 times in the Quran, all in the context of Moses. This historical accuracy in the Quran perfectly aligns with what modern Egyptology discovered thousands of years later. So here is something to think about. If the Quran was copied from the Bible, why does it correct the Bible historical mistake? And where did Prophet Muhammad get the historical accurate details in the 7th century, long before archaeology or Egyptology even existed? Anyways, moving on, in the same story, in the story of Moses and Pharaoh, the Quran includes a crucial detail that's entirely missing from the Bible. Now, obviously, some of us would think that this may be a useless piece of information added by the author that can't be verified. But actually, it turned out that this information holds the key to the profound truth that modern discovery has shockingly confirmed. Both the Bible and the Quran describe how Pharaoh pursued Moses and his people until he drowned in the sea. That's actually a very interesting story for some other time. However, one striking detail mentioned only in the Quran is that the pharaoh's body would be preserved as a sign for future generation. This remarkable claim is completely absent from the Bible. Today, we'll preserve your corpse so that you may become an example for those who come after you. Guess what? In 1881, archaeologists discovered the mummy of Ramses II, the pharaoh widely believed to have ruled during the time of the Moses. His body was found absolutely in great condition and well preserved, and currently on display in the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. Interestingly, when Pharaoh's mummy was discovered and examined, a French doctor, Dr. Maurice Bouquet, he found traces of salt in the lungs, skin, and body tissues, suggesting that the body had been submerged in seawater before the death, perfectly aligning with what the Quran mentioned. But at the time of the Prophet Muhammad, the mummy had not been discovered yet, and even the idea of embalming ancient bodies was unheard of in Arabia. This makes the argument even weaker that the Quran is copied from the Bible. Rather, it shows that the Quran had a different source, one that had access to knowledge beyond the reach of humans at that time. Finally, and perhaps the most obvious point of all, is that even though the same prophets and their stories are mentioned in both the Bible and the Quran, the storyline, if you look closely, are not really similar. For example, the story of Noah and the Great Flood is another most famous story in both of these scriptures. So let's start with the similarities. Both the Bible and the Quran agree that the Noah was a righteous man, chosen by God. He was instructed to build an ark to save the believers, and the flood was sent by God as a punishment for the wicked. And Noah was commanded to take pairs of animals on the ark. But the Bible version of the Noah story is significantly different from the Quran on various aspects. For example, the Bible explicitly states that the flood was global, covering the entire earth and drowning every living being outside the ark. The Quran, on the other hand, does not say the flood was global. The wording throughout the Quran suggests it was a regional flood, meant to punish Noah's own people to whom he was especially sent. This distinction is not just theological, it's scientifically significant because modern geology, archaeology, and genetics all agree that there is absolutely no evidence of a global flood occurring around 3000 to 2000 BCE. Secondly, there are no signs of a global population bottleneck in the human genetic record as mentioned in the Bible. And lastly, there are no consistent global sediment layers that would indicate a worldwide flood at that time. So if you put everything together, this suggests that the Quran version can't have been copied from the Bible because it intentionally avoids flood being global multiple times in the story of Noah and keeps it scientifically accurate. In fact, here are all the major differences in the story of Noah alone. Now, going back to the original claim, if you put all three proofs into perspective, the validity of this claim falls apart. Because what it means is that across these examples, the storyline, while similar in general theme, are very different in detail as we saw in the story of Noah. Secondly, the Quran avoids scientific and logical errors found in the Bible and presents more truthful information. And finally, the Quran adds information not found in the Bible, such as the preservation of the Pharaoh's body, which later turned out to be historically accurate. Now, ask yourself, if the Quran was simply copying the Bible, how it could avoid errors that the Bible makes? And secondly, includes accurate detail lost to history that were nowhere to be found. By the way, the evidence I have presented so far is just the tip of iceberg. I can actually go on for an hour, but let me briefly highlight a few more errors and contradictions in the Bible that are completely absent from the Quran. The book of Genesis says that the earth was created on day 1, but the sun and the stars were created on day 4. Plants were created on day 3 before the sun, and light existed before the light source. Obviously, now we know that based on modern discovery, it is the opposite. The sun formed before the earth, and photosynthesis required sunlight, so plant could not have existed before the sun. Now compare this with the Quran. It says, which is harder to create, you or the sky he built it, raising it high and forming it flawlessly. He dimmed its night and brought forth the daylight. And as for the earth, he spread it out as well, bringing forth its water and pastures. In these verses in the Quran, you will not find any contradiction or errors based on our modern understanding of the universe. But it's not just scientific errors in the Bible that the Quran didn't copy. Bible also include morally troubling passages that are absent from the Quran, further making this claim weaker. For example, in 1 Samuel and in Deuteronomy, God commands the complete destruction of populations, including women and children. Further, it says, happy is the one who seizes your infant and dashes them against the rocks. In Exodus, slavery is regulated and not condemned. In Exodus and Deuteronomy, women are treated as property. Now, if you compare that with the Quran explicitly limits warfare to self-defense and condemns killing the innocent, unlike the biblical commands for indiscriminate slaughter. The Quran encourages emancipation, treats slaves as equals, and lays the foundation for abolition, unlike the Bible, which institutionalized slavery. Further, the Quran insists on consent, kindness, and honorable treatment of women, and outright condemns forced marriage or sexual exploitation. Now, before I wrap up this video, some of you must still be wondering, even if the author of the Quran didn't copy it from the Bible, why are there similarities anyway? And how can it have a common source given that both the books are from a very different religions? Well, the answer may take a whole another video, and I would love to definitely make a video on it. But in short, this is simply because Islam, as opposed to popular belief, didn't come 1400 years ago, and it was not founded by Prophet Muhammad. Instead, as per the Quran, this is the way of life established by God for mankind since Adam. It says in the Quran, the same religion has He established for you as that which He enjoined on Noah, the which we have sent by inspiration to you, and that which we have enjoined on Abraham, Moses, Jesus, namely that you should remain steadfast in your religion and make no division therein. The Quran also highlights that all these prophets of God, from Adam to Muhammad, taught the same core message to their people. While their laws differed due to time, place, and context, the core message was always the same, as mentioned in chapter 21. We never sent a messenger before you without revealing to him, there is no God but me, so worship me. Quran further mentioned that both Moses and Jesus were given the scriptures to guide their people. As it says, then in the footsteps of the prophets, we sent Jesus the son of Mary, confirming the Torah revealed before him, and we gave him the gospel containing guidance and light. So, if you find similarities between the Bible and the Quran, it's not because one copied from the another. It's because they all came from the same divine source. But only the Quran remains intact and free from any alteration, while Torah and the Gospel were altered and corrupted by human hand. A fact acknowledged by many scholars of religion, including Christians. And the Quran makes this clear. Unfortunately, we do not have authentic Torah and the Gospel that were revealed to Moses and Jesus in its original form. But what we do have is an unaltered word of God revealed to the last prophet of God. Do they not reflect upon the Quran? Had it been from anyone other than Allah, they would have found therein much contradiction. But if you still have doubt if the Quran is indeed word of God, check out my previous video. See you next time.